Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulil Kareem, wa ala ali wa ashabi, wa man istanna bi sunnati ila yawmiddin. All praise is due to Allah, and may Allah's peace and blessings be on His last Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and on all those who follow the path of righteousness until the last day. Could you just shift actually to this side of the room so those people who are coming late will not be having difficulty? Just come and fill up this side, please. Yes. All the seats. Yeah, just so they have access to get in. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. In the previous session, and we are continuing to look at Surah Al-Kahf, the 18th chapter of the Quran, and we are still on the story of the youths who were in the cave. We completed in the previous session verses 17 and 18, and inshallah we'll cover basically 19 and 20 in this session, still looking at the story of the youths. In 18 and 19, or 17 and 18, sorry, Allah there described the situation within the cave itself. What was the state of their sleeping within the cave? He described certain miraculous things about the youths in the cave, how the sun came into the cave, how their bodies would shift from side to side, and we talked about the significance of that. And that all of these different phenomena were from the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we also mentioned that actually in the case of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in his own hijrah to Medina, there was the case of the cave where he hid with Abu Bakr on their way to Medina. And this was again from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A number of different miracles took place in the course of their hijrah to Medina. Of course, there are some stories which are associated with the cave, like that of the spider weaving its web over the front of the cave. This is fabricated, it's not authentic. Or the story about some doves or something, birds at the entrance of the cave. This is also fabricated. This is not correct. There are other incidents which took place which are authentically reported, and this is why, of course, for us, when it comes to studying the life of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it is important for us to get, authentic sources, because unfortunately we do have a lot of fairy tales circulating amongst us, which we think are, true stories about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when in fact they're fables. Following that, that was verse 17. In verse 18, Allah continued to describe their state, where they appeared to those who may have come across the cave as being awake, and in fact their state, flipping from one side to the other, turning their bodies turning like this, was such a scary sight that anybody seeing them would have fled. And then we talked about the fact that Allah describes the dog there in the cave, and normally we find that, as we said before, when Allah describes stories in the Quran, He only mentions details which are important. I mentioned before that if you compare the story of Prophet Yusuf or Prophet Moses or Prophet Abraham in the Bible with that in the Quran is a very small record in comparison. Maybe only a tenth of what is written in the Bible. But what you find is that in that tenth, everything mentioned has a particular message. There are clear lessons. The spiritual message is loud and clear. whereas in the biblical stories they tend to be confused and hidden within a lot of unnecessary detail. So one would then question, why did Allah speak about the dog? The dog sitting in the mouth of the cave, stretching it with its legs outstretched. What did we say last time concerning the dog?
It was awake in a position of God.
Well, they concluded that probably it was awake, because in the case of the youths, they were sleeping, but in the case of the dog, it was awake. But there was something else. What did we say was the significance of the dog, of Allah mentioning the dog?
It was alive.
Well, no, we said alive, but something else. What was it? There was something. So what if the dog is alive?
As a God.
Well, still, Allah could have guarded them otherwise. The dog, their state was a scary state. Allah said that people would have turned and not fled. There was another point that we mentioned. The point was that the dog was preserved. The barakah, or the blessing which had come on the use of the cave, so that they would live for some 300 plus years in a state of sleep, that barakah encompassed even their dog. And we said the lesson which we drew from that was that companionship of the righteous brings good. That if you are in the presence of the righteous, good will come for the righteous. It will include you. And we mentioned other references, statements of the Prophet ﷺ. We talked about, remember, that he said, choose your companions well, that the good companion is like the perfume merchant. Remember, we went through and we spoke about that. So, and we said on the other hand too, it is also a warning to choose your companions in the sense that we avoid bad companions. Because an evil companion will also bring on us evil. As Allah mentioned, that we should fear a fitna which would not only strike the evil amongst us, but if we are living amongst them, then we will be subject to it also. So, that was the other point that we mentioned with regards to the cave. Now going on to verse number 19. وَكَذَلِكَ بَعَثْنَاهُمْ لِيَتَسَاءَلُوا بَيْنَهُمْ قَالَ قَائِلٌ مِّنْهُمْ كَمْ لَبِثْتُمْ قَالُوا لَبِثْنَا يَوْمًا أَوْ بَعْضَ يَوْمٍ قَالُوا رَبُّكُمْ أَعْلَمُ بِمَا لَبِثْتُمْ فَبَعَثُوا أَحَدَكُمْ بِوَرِقِكُمْ هذه إلى المدينة فلينظر أيها أزكى طعاما فليأتكم برزق منه وليتلطف ولا يشعرن بكم أحدا إنهم إن يظهروا عليكم يرجموكم أو يعيدوكم في ملتهم ولن تفلحوا إذن أبدا. And in that way I raised them up again. So they questioned each other. One of them asked, how long have you spent here? The others answered, we have spent a day or a part of a day. Then they declared, your Lord knows best how long you have spent. So send one of you with this silver money to the city to look for a place with the best food, so that he may bring something to eat. He should, however, be cautious and not let anyone be aware of us. For if they succeed in overpowering us, then surely they would stone us to death or force us back to their belief, and in that case we would never be successful ever. A point to note, for those of you that have your notes there with you and following it from Ibn Kathir, that the text says, وَكَذَلِكَ بَعَثْنَاهُمْ, and in that way we sent them, or we raised them up again. And you'll notice I'm consistently translating we as I. And I explained that earlier, as Sheikh Al-Uthaymeen had mentioned, that this term we means I. It is what is known as the royal we. But it's not in common use in English today. And because of that, I have avoided it to avoid confusion. Because you will find missionaries, for example, coming to Muslims and saying, well, your God is not one. Like you claim. Here he is calling himself we all the time. So, this to avoid that confusion, because this is a special Arabic construction. It exists in English, but it's so rarely used that the mass of people don't know it. So really it is not really an appropriate translation, and to avoid confusion, you notice that I will consistently use I. Unless we, of course, there are certain cases where it's not referring to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself, but it's referring to the angels or something like this, then we'll use that plural. So in verses 19 and 20, Allah here begins to describe the next phase of their story, which is awakening them. In the first, He put them to sleep. And He says, وَكَذَلِكَ, and in the same way, in the same miraculous way in which He put them to sleep, He has miraculously brought them back awake and alive. Because really, the miracle of bringing them alive again is even greater than the miracle of putting them to sleep, preserving their bodies for hundreds of years, centuries. Because if we think about it, there are a variety of different reasons why bodies have been preserved for hundreds of years. We can still see the mummies of the Egyptians. These are bodies preserved for thousands of years. We can find, due to natural processes, a few years back they found a caveman frozen in the glaciers in the Alps. Right? He's a man from 50,000 years ago. His body froze, and they said his flesh was as if he just died today. So preservation can come in a variety of different ways. You also find in the dryness of the desert, people just dying on the desert and their bodies being preserved because the dryness takes any kind of liquid from the body and just makes it like, fossilize it almost, right? So the bodies are preserved. And, for other reasons due to chemical composition of soil, etc., occasionally in different parts of the world, people end up digging up graves and finding bodies in there as if they were just buried today. It's not a common occurrence, but it does happen. I remember reading about cases of it happening in the Philippines and elsewhere, where due to the composition of the earth, the body may be preserved in that way. So the miracle now is really bringing them back to life after hundreds of years in that state. That's the miracle. Because all the other cases, they're dead bodies. Anyhow, whether it's fossilized, whether it's dried up, whether it's frozen, they're dead. There's no life coming back to those bodies. So Allah then referred to this element of the miracle that He has also brought them back to life. So they questioned each other. He goes on to say, they questioned each other. And this is the nature of people who sleep, isn't it? When you get up, you question. If you are sleeping, some other people are sleeping, you're going to ask each other, well, how long did we sleep for? Or if there's somebody awake around you, you say, how long was I asleep? Because once you enter into that state of sleep, you lose track of time. You can go to sleep for 10 minutes, 15 minutes and think you slept for hours. You can sleep for what you thought to be 10 minutes, and in fact you were sleeping for hours. You just woke up and said, what did you wake me up again just now for? I just went to sleep. No, you've been sleeping for the last 2 hours. This is a common occurrence. So naturally, when Allah woke them back up, they questioned each other about how long they had spent there. And of course, because there was nobody external to them to give them accurate information, then basically they were guessing. Some of them said, a day or a part of a day. And scholars of Tafseer, like Al-Qurtubi, suggested that the reason why the youths came to that conclusion was because of the fact that they had entered in the cave in the morning, and when they were woken up, it was the evening. So for them, it appeared like, well, we're there for part of a day. But others, reflecting on it, knowing that really ultimately we don't have any idea really how long we've been here, they said, your Lord knows best how long we've spent here. Right? Putting it back to Allah, because really they didn't have any means of determining, of gauging how long they were asleep. So this part of the text addresses the issue of the passage of time. And there are a couple of points that we could deduce from it. One, besides the fact that people are not aware of time as it passes, when we are in the waking state, time seems to go over a long period. When we're in the sleeping state, it seems to pass quickly. We find that those people who are raised up for the judgment, and they are asked themselves, how long were they in the world? They gave the same answer as these youths in the cave. We find in Surah Al-Mu'minun, it's 23rd chapter, verses 112, 113, قال كم لبثتم في الأرض عدد سنين قالوا لبثنا يوما أو بعض يوم فاسأل العادين. He will say, that's Allah will ask them, what number of years did you spend on the earth? They will reply, we stayed for a day or a part of a day. Ask those who keep account. Our life on this earth will seem like a day or a part of a day. And truly, when we look back in the past, now, we've reached 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, we look back, it seems like, hey, it's just a minute ago we were kids, right? Of course, for the kids, they're just looking ahead. It seems like a long way before they get to grandpa or dad or whatever. But for us looking back, it seems like it was just, a flash. And this is something that we should reflect on from the perspective that the Quran talks about this passage of time, the quick passage of time in a number of places. For us to reflect on the passage of time. The Prophet ﷺ had said, as reported by Ibn Abbas, نعمتان مغبون فيهما كثير من الناس الصحة والفراغ. There are two things about which many people are fooled: health and spare time. There are two things about which many people are fooled: health and spare time. This is a warning. This is a note that the Prophet ﷺ has passed on to us. This is Satan. Actually, the term fooled here is also cheated. Maghboon. It means cheated, really cheating in terms of business. You're cheated out of something. The same term is used, maghboon. That we are tricked and cheated by Satan out of using our health and our spare time wisely. Instead of using it to worship Allah, to do righteous deeds, we talk about time to kill, right? I got some time to kill, let's go do this, let's go do that. Time to blow, just to waste, just do something silly, of no account. Really, this is a mistake. This should not be a part of our thinking. Ibn Abbas had also narrated that the Prophet ﷺ had advised a man saying, اغتنم خمسا قبل خمس شبابك قبل هرمك وصحتك قبل سقمك وغناءك قبل فقرك وفراغك قبل شغلك وحياتك قبل موتك. Take advantage of 5 before 5. Your youth before your old age. Your health before your illness. Your wealth before your poverty. Your spare time before you become busy. And your life before your death. Take advantage of 5 before 5. Your youth before your old age. Your health before your illness. Your wealth before your poverty. Your spare time before you become busy. And your life before your death. This is a very important message that we all should reflect on. We always think that there's time. Right? There's time to do it. All this relates back to time, really. Youth, because there's time. You're not old yet. There's still time. We talked before about people saying, don't make Hajj now, remember? Because you're still young and doing a lot of bad deeds. So Wait until you get older, later on. Then you go and make Hajj, clean things up. No, it's a mistake. If you're conscious now, you have to do what is right now. Because the time doesn't come back. That youth, every day of your youth, is gone. There's no bringing it back. You can't say, okay, let me do that over again. There's no doing it over. The day is gone, the time is gone, the hour is gone, that's it. It's not coming back. Similarly, your health. Again, people leave Hajj until old age. But what happens is that when you reach 70, 75, 80, you want to go and make Hajj then. Hajj is not like making Hajj when you're in your teens. You're 18, you're 20, 25. You can go there, get through that Hajj, you're stoning, you do everything. You come through, you're smiling. When you're 75 or 80, you're trying to do that same Hajj. That's a major operation. It's great difficulty. So what could have been done easily, pleasing to Allah, etc., becomes something which is, a great burden, a great struggle. So, and similarly with other acts of worship, all of our, supererogatory acts of worship. You're young, you have health, kneeling, prostrating, all these things are easy. Once you get older, people have got chairs in the masjid. They have to be sitting on chairs and can't bow. This and all kinds of things affecting our prayers, our fasting, all the other things that with old age becomes so much more difficult. Same thing with health, right? You're healthy. We should take advantage of our health now before we become so sick you can't do this anymore. You can't do other acts, righteous acts, which will increase our good deeds. And similarly, wealth before poverty. Wealth before poverty. We have the wealth now Allah has given us, give of it. We talk about being generous and the importance of generosity in Islam and zakah and all these different things, but we're sitting on our money, right? For the future, right? For retirement, for this and for that. We're sitting on it, And if you die tomorrow, what use was that money? You left it for time to come. And similarly, our spare time before we become busy, the so-called spare time that we have, we waste it in areas which bring no benefit to us. But then our life becomes very busy. And the things we wanted to do, we can't do it because we have no time anymore. And similarly, our life before our death. Allah has given us a time now where we can do things. We're living. As long as we're living, good deeds can be done. Once we die, then that's it. Abdullah ibn Umar ibn al-Khattab used to say, if the evening catches you, do not wait until the morning to do good. And if the morning catches you, do not wait until the evening. Instead, take from your health for the time of your sickness, and from your life for your death. This is the same, concept of time is money. Time is golden. For us, it is money in the sense of spiritual capital. Time is spiritual capital. It's valuable. It is an opportunity to gain for ourselves great rewards, great profits. But they're spiritual. So that's why time for us is golden. Time to kill, time to waste, time to blow. Spare time really shouldn't be a part of our vocabulary. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Surah Sharh, 94th chapter, verse 7 and 8, فَإِذَا فَرَغْتَ فَانْصَبْ وَإِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ فَارْغَبْ. So when you have finished whatever you were busy with, what do you do then? Rest? Take some spare time? He said, no. Devote yourself to worship. فَانْصَبْ وَإِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ فَارْغَبْ. And turn your desires and hopes to your Lord alone. So whatever time we have, that time should be doing things which are pleasing to Allah. It doesn't mean that we cannot enjoy ourselves. We cannot go on a vacation from work. But there's no vacation from Islam. That's the point. That even though we're taking a vacation from work, we're not on vacation as Muslims. Wherever we go, we should still be conscious of our responsibilities to give da'wah to people, to explain to them Islam, to command the good, prohibit the evil. We should be remembering Allah in the course of our travels, etc. So it is not time wasted. The second point which can be deduced from this verse, talking about time and the sleep, wherein those youths had no awareness of the passage of time, is that the question that sometimes people raise concerning the barzakh, the period of the grave. When a person dies, he enters into the barzakh. He can't come back in this world. He cannot communicate with what's going on in this world. He has no awareness of what's going on in this world. But he's in the state of the grave, which the Prophet ﷺ described, wherein the grave is either a pit from the pits of pits of hell, or a garden from the gardens of paradise. Right? And you remain in that state until resurrection. So, a person may say, what about those people who died 10,000 years ago? They're just lying in the grave there, suffering. Then you might die today and Qiyamah is tomorrow. It's not fair. It's not fair. You know, there seems to be unfairness here, right? Whereas the reality, you know, as it's commonly referred to, at least in Arabic texts and that sleep is the brother of death. As in sleep, you're not conscious of the passage of time. Similarly, when you die, you're not aware of the passage of time. So you're in the grave 10,000 years, or 1 year, it's all the same. You have left the time zone anyway. You're no longer subject to the rising of and setting of the sun, rotation of the earth, you know, the years passing. You're no longer subject to that because you've entered the barzakh. You've left this material world anyway. So the issue of coming back for resurrection, it's all the same for everybody. As in some narrations it's mentioned that the person's death is the beginning of their resurrection. So that's not the issue for us. Now, after Allah brought the sleepers awake, brought them back awake, naturally after sleeping for 300 years plus, they experienced hunger. They felt hungry. And you find then that the discussion switches from how long we were sleeping to let's go find some food. Right? That was the next logical step. That's the next route to go. So after they said, your Lord knows best how long you have spent, so send one of you with this silver money to the city to look for a place with the best food. That was the next point of conversation. And from this statement found in the Quran, the scholars have derived a number of different fiqh principles. First is the permissibility of engaging others as agents in purchasing and selling. I mean, of course, we're taking it for granted now, but technically speaking, there should be some ruling concerning it. You give somebody money, and they go and buy something on your behalf. And there are rules governing it. Actually, some scholars held that you're not allowed to do this, except in absolute, difficult circumstances. And they said, well, this verse doesn't really support the argument that you can do it. Anyhow, they said because they were in a critical circumstance. If they had all gone out looking for food, then they would be exposed. They had to do it secretly, so they only had to send a couple of people. So this only provides evidence for the permissibility under circumstances of duress or danger for you to make a person your agent to go and purchase or sell. This was the position of Abu Hanifa. This is what he held. Also, one of the scholars of the Maliki madhab, companions of Imam Malik, Sahnun, he also held this position. However, there is enough evidence from the Sunnah to refute that, really. We have a well-known hadith narrated by Urwa ibn Abi al-Ja'ad al-Baqiri, in which he related that the Prophet ﷺ gave him a dinar to buy a sheep for him. So he went into the marketplace and he was able to buy 2 sheep. One of the sheep he sold back and got a dinar, and he came back to the Prophet ﷺ with the sheep he asked him to buy plus the dinar. And the Prophet ﷺ asked Allah to bless him in his sales. And he said from then on, this individual, even if he bought dirt, he would make profit from it. Allah just blessed him in whatever business dealings he was involved in. Of course, from this hadith, some people have this idea about maximum profits, that your profits should not exceed a certain amount. But if we look at this here, this is 100%. People look at this as being exorbitant, but the Prophet ﷺ approved 100% profit. So there are no limits as to profit, but there are limits as to, whether the product you're selling is something which is basic necessity of the society. If you're going to hoard it, keep it from people so you can maximize your profit, then no, Islam says no, you can't do that. But if it is luxury items, which people they can live their lives without it, then if you want to monopolize it and just put it on the market in small amounts because supply and demand affects the market price, and you want to do that, then it's permissible. So it's basic necessities you're not allowed to do it in. So really there is no limit in terms of profits as long as you're not going beyond the bounds of oppressing the society by monopolizing basic necessities. Anyway, the second point is that there is no harm also, this is proof in it, there's no harm for a person to seek the nicest food. Because some people might feel, well, no, this is not pious, this is impious. If you have to go and you should just get, what's available, rather than going around checking the market and try to find the nicest possible. No. Here it is, approved of by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's perfectly legitimate. Look for the best, why not? Thirdly, it contains evidence of the weakness of the scholars' opinion, those scholars who held that describing something as being the nicest in the course of selling your product is not permissible. That is, somebody says, I'm selling you the best possible wheat, the best possible car, the best, I'm selling you the best. So some people took the position, scholars held the position that it's not permissible to use this term, because whatever you say is best, there is a better. Whatever you say is best, there will be somewhere in the market something better. So it's really not true. But this text from the Quran, as well as some other narrations from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, do indicate that use of the term best in the case of buying and selling is permissible. I mean, you're doing it relative to your knowledge, to the custom in that particular area. You're saying, this is the best that I know of. That's what you mean. You're not necessarily saying the best possible in the whole world. Best that I know of. And the term, when they told the people who they had sent into town to go look for food, they told them, look for a place with the best food. Ibn Kathir, he explained that the term best here, azka, that this actually meant the purest food. Because Allah says elsewhere in the Quran, Surah An-Nur, verse 21, وَلَوْلَا فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ وَرَحْمَتُهُ مَا زَكَى مِنْكُمْ مِنْ أَحَدٍ أَبَدًا. Had it not been for the grace of Allah and His mercy on you, not one of you would ever have been pure from his sins. Right? وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يُزَكِّي مَنْ يَشَاءُ. But Allah purifies whom He wills. We also have in Surah Al-A'la, verse 14, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ تَزَكَّى. Indeed, whoever purifies himself will achieve success. And this is where the word zakah comes from. That it is derived from the same root, indicating a purification of one's wealth. Right? So, this specific designation of looking for the purest food, the best, purest food, we can find in it Allah stressing here the importance of us in general eating what is beneficial for human bodies and what is halal according to the teachings of Islam. As a general principle, our eating habits should be governed by these principles. That what we eat should be beneficial. We should avoid as much as possible what they call junk food. They're calling it junk food for a reason. It is junk. Its benefits are minimal. You waste a lot of money, and in fact, moderate amounts of it are harmful. Small amounts, okay, you can get by without it. It minimizes its harm. But moderate amounts of this so-called junk food becomes harmful. This is why schools, for example, here and in other countries, they're banned from selling junk food to the students, because raising children on junk food, raising children on pop and soda, where they develop this sweet tooth, we call it. In the West, you develop a sweet tooth. So you just have to have so much sugar in everything you eat, you know. Things just don't taste right unless you have that level of sugar. Because basically you're being addicted. Your body is becoming addicted to a level of sugar which is in fact not really healthy for you. So, as a Muslim, though, yes, we do have freedom to choose the type of foods we want to eat, etc. We do have freedom in this regard. At the same time, we are responsible, we have a responsibility to our bodies to look after them in the best way we can. And of course, this includes exercise and a variety of other things that most of us are lacking in these days. This also includes the concept of eating even at somebody's house who has earned his food from haram means. If somebody works in a bank, he's a banker, his earnings are from interest. That food is haram. And we should avoid putting such food in our systems. Because there's a well-known hadith narrated by Abu Huraira, in which he said that the Prophet ﷺ had said, "O people, Allah is pure and He only accepts what is pure. أيها الناس إن الله طيب لا يقبل إلا طيبا." For indeed Allah commanded the believers what He commanded the messengers. He said, "O messengers, eat from the pure foods and do right. Indeed, I know well what you do." And Allah also said, "O believers, eat from the pure food and good foods which I have given you." Then He mentioned a traveler on a long journey, whose hair was disheveled and dusty, his clothes were all dusty, who stretched his hands out towards the sky, saying, "O Lord, Ya Rabbi, Ya Rabbi." But his food was unlawful, his drink was unlawful, his clothing was unlawful, and he was nourished unlawfully. So how could his prayers be answered? Now in this example, the Prophet ﷺ identified an individual who had combined in himself some of the major factors to assure the answering of our prayers. First, he was a traveler, We all know that the prayer of the traveler is answered. Prophet ﷺ said it. So this man was not just a regular traveler, he was on a long journey away from his home. Secondly, he had a rough appearance. It was a difficult journey. His hair is disheveled, he's all dusty. Again, a pitiful situation, which, brings the sympathy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Thirdly, his hands were outstretched, and the Prophet ﷺ had said that Allah feels shy that his servant would raise his hands in prayer and that he would put them down empty. Fourthly, he used one of the most powerful and comprehensive names of Allah as a means of tawassul. When he's calling on Allah, he used the name Rabb. Ar-Rabb is one of the most powerful names of Allah. That's why he says, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Fifthly, he repeated the prayer. Ya Rabb, Ya Rabb. And the Prophet ﷺ had said that we should repeat our prayers to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Call on Him often and repeat it. To bring, because when we repeat something, this is when you're desperate. You call out, help me, help me, help me. If you're not desperate, say, okay, can you give me help? Help me out on this. But when you're really desperate, then you're repeating. So in the same way, we should approach Allah in our prayers, and this man is doing it. So in spite of all of these, his prayer is not only rejected, but the Prophet ﷺ ridiculed his efforts. Not only did he say it wasn't accepted, he said, how could he possibly get it answered? It's ridiculed. So this is telling us that really, if we want our prayers accepted, we have to be careful about what we consume. So in the same way, to go and eat in somebody's home whose earnings is from haram, this is definitely something we should avoid. Try to put whatever we put in our systems from halal, that it is earned in a halal way. The food itself is halal. This is what is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then the youths, when they told the individuals who to go into town to purchase the food, they said he should, however, be cautious and not let anyone be aware of us. Those who went in to get the food, they should be very cautious. Not just walk in there openly, so that they wouldn't be discovered. Because they went on to describe that if they're discovered, what's going to happen to them? These people are going to try to force them back into their religion, and they're going to, being upright individuals who stood firm for their faith, they would likely be killed. Though Islamically, yes, it is permissible in times of life-threatening circumstances to say what you need to say to get out of that circumstance. Tell a lie, say you disbelieve or whatever to protect your life. But these individuals were among those who were firm in faith to the degree that they would prefer death rather than to express it. And that's legitimate. In Islam, we have the example of Sumayya and Yasir, the parents of who? Ammar ibn Yasir. Right? Both parents died for Islam. Sumayya being the first Shahida or Shaheed in Islam. She gave up her life. And her husband Yasir followed. They were slaves. They were tortured. And they died rather than express words of kufr. They had accepted Islam and they stuck with it and died with it. In the case of Yasir, when his turn came and they started to torture him, he said what they wanted him to say. They said, say Muhammad is a magician. He said, okay, he's a magician. Say that your God is Lat and Uzza and Manat. He said, okay, my gods are Lat, Uzza and Manat. Whatever they asked him, he said it. He couldn't take the torture. But after he did it, he felt shy. He used to be around the Prophet ﷺ in his circles all the time. But after he said these things, now he felt defiled. He didn't feel right about it, so he stopped coming. The Prophet ﷺ missed him. Where is Yasir? So he sent somebody to go find him. When they found him, asked him what, he told him what happened, and so he came back and told the Prophet ﷺ, he said, bring him. So Yasir came, he asked him, when you said those things, was your heart filled with Iman, or had you fallen into that state, disbelief? He said, no, my heart was filled with Iman. He said, well, if they do it to you again, say what you said. Okay? So this is an option. This is the practicality of Islam. Because there are some people that can be Sumayya and Yasir, and some people who can't. In fact, the most of us can't. Sumayya and Yasir, they're the exceptions. And Islam praises it, honors it. But for the mass of us, okay, we do have the option of Yasir's way out. Right? That's permissible. Of course, when they told those who are going into the town to be cautious and not let anyone be aware of them, this is showing really they had no idea how long they slept. Because imagine somebody coming, walking amongst us wearing clothes from 300 years ago, with money from 300 years ago. Hey, that would be like, everybody would spot him right away. Although in our times, we have people who do dress up in costumes, so we might think they're in costume. But if you go back a few years when people were not into wearing costumes, somebody who comes amongst you wearing the clothing of 300 years before is going to be weird. He will be spotted in a minute. So though they are taking precaution and everything, they don't realize what they're going into. And that's what the next verses now address. The fact that they were set up, Allah set them up in that sense. They were going to go into a situation which they had no control over. They would be exposed. They took the necessary precautions because Islam does recognize that we take precaution. But in the end, Allah had already set certain things in motion. They were going to be exposed, and that whole issue would develop around them, which we'll look at in verse 21, 22. Before going there, we can mention some of the lessons or benefits from these two verses. Sheikh Sa'di, the teacher of Sheikh Al-Uthaymeen, in his Tafseer called Tafseer Al-Karim Al-Rahman, he mentioned 7 benefits. One of them we mentioned earlier, so I'm just going to focus on 6 which were not specifically mentioned. The first is the importance of knowledge and an encouragement to seek it. This is derived from the fact that Allah awoke them from sleep for this reason, in order that they may ask one another. So what is stressed here is an issue of knowledge. Knowledge being important, critical for Iman, critical for the practice of Islam. Prophet ﷺ said, "Talabul ilmi farida ala kulli Muslim." Seeking knowledge is obligatory for every Muslim. So the issue of knowledge is foremost. Secondly, the etiquette required of one who is confused or unsure about some issue. They were asking each other, what was the answer, Who knows, how long did we sleep for? Some said, say, day or part of a day, we said, because they had gone in the morning, came out in the evening. They woke up in the evening, so it seems like about a day or part of the day. But the other ones, who were more, you could say, had deeper insight, they said, hey, your Lord knows best how long we have spent. Take it back to Allah, leave it with Allah. Where we are unsure, we leave it with Allah, and don't try to go into areas that we don't really have knowledge of. Just stop where we are. We don't know. Move ahead from there. Thirdly, the permissibility to eat good and tasty foods as long as it does not reach the point of impermissible excessiveness. That is, eating good, tasty food is no harm. But as long as we don't become excessive, buying huge amounts of money, spending huge amounts of money on food and, eating to excess, actually this is something cursed. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had said in Sahih al-Bukhari, describing the time to come, where there would appear amongst Muslims, he said, وَيَظْهَرْ فِيهِمْ السِّمَنِ. There would appear amongst them fatties, fatsos, big fat people, right? Describing the Muslims in the future, when they are deviated. Obesity would be prominent amongst them. So it is not something that is praiseworthy in Islam, something looked down upon. I mean, of course, a person who has a glandular problem, that's something else. But obesity as a result of overeating, living sedentary lives, this is something not pleasing to Allah. It is something which is considered to be of bad character. Now, in terms of eating the tasty and the good foods, this is especially for people who are accustomed to it. People who are grown up in an area where, these foods are available, you eat it, then it's perfectly okay. It doesn't mean that, people are in general encouraged to go seek out, because then you become connoisseurs of food. No. Islam doesn't encourage this. But if you live in an area with a variety of food, tasty, etc., no harm in doing so. And because of this issue actually of the tasty and the good foods, some scholars of tafseers had concluded that those youths were the children of kings of that time, because they were accustomed to eating good and tasty food. Because notice when they sent the one into town, they didn't just say, go get us some food. They said, get good, tasty food. Okay, means that obviously they didn't come from a background which was, a poorer background where you just eat whatever comes. Huh? So this led some of the scholars of Tafseer to conclude that they were actually youths from the families of the ruling families. Of course, again, maybe Allah knows best really. We don't have clear evidence for it. The fourth point, there is an encouragement to implement caution and concealment, and to stay away from situations that may be a source of trial for one's religion. The use of caution, although in general Islam encourages people to be open-minded, sharing what they have, but there are circumstances which require caution. And in such cases, then Islam encourages us to use it. I mean, especially where we're in situations where being open may create fitna. This is an important point which is actually demonstrated by Abu Huraira. There's a narration in Sahih Bukhari where Abu Huraira said that he had 2 bags, some narrations said 3 bags of knowledge. One bag he shared, and the other one he kept. For had he shared the other, his head would have been cut off. Now, this is authentic narration. This is a statement of Abu Huraira. It's not from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is Abu Huraira speaking. You have some groups of people, the mystics, Sufis, who claim that was the knowledge. That secret knowledge of Abu Huraira. And they have this kind of claims that they have certain secret knowledge which is handed down from their sheikh to this one, to that one. This knowledge which you shouldn't even reveal to the common people. You have to keep it hidden from them. Right? But this is not the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What he said is, تَرَكْتُكُمْ عَلَى مَحَجَّةٍ بَيْضَةٍ I left you on a clear white plain. لَيْلُهَا كَنَهَارِهَا Whose day is like its night. لَا يَزِيغُ عَنْهَا إِلَّا هَالِكٌ And whoever deviates from it is destroyed. So he left the clear message out there. Now Abu Huraira, as scholars explain, how did they explain this hadith? Because it seems to imply that he had some secret knowledge. But this knowledge was, according to the scholars, knowledge of the corrupt rulers who were to come. That he was at a time of Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, who massacred, killed how many Sahaba? He was a very violent individual. And others like him. The rulers at the time were slaughtering the Sahaba. So rather than express knowledge which he had, which was knowledge, and cause himself to be killed, and note that he was the most prolific narrator of hadith, means a major portion of his knowledge would be cut off. He kept silent on it. It wasn't knowledge which was critical for the deen, because of course there is knowledge which is correct knowledge, truth, but it's not critical. And then there's knowledge which is critical. When the Prophet ﷺ said seeking knowledge is obligatory on everyone, it's the critical knowledge, not general knowledge, which is not critical for your practice of the deen. So if one finds oneself in a situation where expressing certain knowledge may create fitna, create a greater problem than you're trying to resolve by expressing this knowledge, then it's better to be quiet. For example, I remember a long time back when I was studying in Medina, in the course of my studies I came to learn, along with a group of other brothers, that praying with your shoes on It's from the Sunnah. But the Prophet ﷺ encouraged us to pray with our shoes on. But nobody knew it. It's a forgotten Sunnah. Right? Most people don't know it. I mean, they're under the impression, the mass of Muslims in the world are under the impression that if you pray with your shoes on, your prayer is invalid. Because your shoe has walked in different places, you got filth on it someplace, somehow, sometime. Even if you wanted to wear brand new shoes, they would still say, don't wear your shoes on. Okay. So, some of the brothers who were with me, they decided they wanted to bring alive this sunnah in the masjid of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Right? So they came into the masjid from in Fajr, coming in from the door which you lead right to the front line of the masjid, right? Walking in with their shoes on. And of course you have old Muslims there from traditional countries, from Pakistan, from Turkey, etc. Who, for them, hey, this is not right. So when they came walking in, they pointed them, they couldn't of course speak, they were speaking Arabic, whatever, they were pointing to them, showing them shoes, take it off, remove. Wasakh. They're saying, no, sunnah. And they're walking in. So of course these brothers got up, they want to stop these people from defiling the masjid. And a big fight ensued in the masjid. Masjid al-Nabawi. Eventually, of course, the Turks were very strong individuals there. They got these guys, and some Pakistanis, Pathans. They got them and they threw them bodily out of the masjid. Threw them out of the masjid. And they felt, alhamdulillah, that they had protected the Prophet's masjid from defilement. And of course, these brothers, as they hit the concrete, were feeling that, they were trying to keep alive the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, right? One of the scholars from Medina University came to us, and he told us, hey, listen, it's a good idea to bring alive the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. But where people haven't reached that level of knowledge, then it's better not to introduce that knowledge there. Raise their level first to the point where they can accept it, and then you introduce it. Out where you were, we were in a masjid on the outskirts of Medina, which had a gravel floor and just some plastic mats, whatever. He said, pray with it out here, no problem. You all know about it, nobody's going to say anything, You can keep it alive here. But Masjid al-Nabawi, best not. Alhamdulillah, it made sense to me. But some brothers, some things just don't go into heads too easily, right? So they insisted they were going to go back down there again. Till eventually the authorities, ended up putting some of them in jail. Yeah. Anyway, so this is the point that, you may have knowledge, maybe correct knowledge, but the time to apply it and to teach it may not be appropriate. So it's better to avoid it. You're going into an area, you've learned from the Sunnah that it was the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ at the end of Fatiha to say Ameen aloud. Some narrations describe the masjid's wall shaking with Ameen. But now you have certain parts of the world, you go there, you say Ameen, you'd be the only one saying Ameen. People will be asking you after the masjid, where you come from? What kind of innovation have you brought here? And you could create the big fitna. So in those areas, you say Ameen under your breath. Ameen. You don't have to say it that loud, right? That's not a requirement. So you can still keep your sunnah alive, but not put it as something that you're just hitting people in their faces with your sunnah. It's sunnah, but they're not ready for it. So better we educate them first before we bring it. The fifth point was, in their stories, we have an example of their great religious desire and commitment. The commitment and desire which they had for their religion, their willingness to abandon all of the things, the life they were living for the sake of their religion. And their willingness to make hijrah, to give it up. These are among the lessons that we can take from the example of the youths in the cave. And finally, the verses mention the harm and corruption contained in evil, which should encourage one to detest and completely abandon it. And that is the way of the believers, past and present. As the youths had said, or else you will never be successful. If we were to go back due to the pressure put on us by the society, then we would forfeit our religion, we would forfeit this worldly life, as well as the afterlife. We would be in total loss. That's the position that they took, meaning that they would be prepared to die for their faith. Okay, so that basically covers verses 19 to 20. If you have any questions you'd like to raise on this, please go ahead.
You told about selling and buying. What is the position of ads in Islam?
About?
Ads, advertisement.
Advertisement. Talk about this question concerning advertisement in Islam. Of course, advertisement is permissible. When you're caught in the marketplace, if you're telling people this is a good product or whatever, this is your advertisement. Technology has put it up on billboards and paper and television or newspapers, whatever. It's permissible. But, of course, in advertisements, as with everything, there are limits. We're not allowed to deceive. Commonly, for example, if you look and you're going to buy a computer, they have these ads for computers in the newspaper, right? They'll show you the CPU, the main body. They'll show a keyboard and a monitor and mouse and everything. And there's a little asterisk. If you don't notice it, you go down the bottom and it's written in very small writing. You have to put a magnifying glass on it. It says, the prices mentioned above are only for the CPU. Huh? Meaning the monitor, the keyboard, everything else is not included. But that's deception. That kind of advertisement is not permissible. We'll pause for the adhan. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam wa rasulillah. The question was clear? There. Now, our brother's question, going back to the issue of advertisement, where we're only mentioning the plus elements of our product. Is this permissible? Yes, it is permissible. I mean, you're advertising something for sale. You tell what are the, what makes this worth buying. So you tell that. If there is some harm in the product, then you are obliged, if people are going to purchase this, you are obliged to let them know that there is element of harm. Even in the West, for medicines, for example, they require people to identify the negative effects, what are side effects that can come from it. Similarly, they'll put toys, for example, certain toys may be harmful for small kids. You might swallow something, it will choke them or whatever. So they put here, not suitable for children under so and such an age. So adding, of course, this is from Islamic principles, that you add to your advertisement where there is some danger or some harm in its usage, then that should also be mentioned in your product. Huh? Well, defects, of course, should be told to the individuals who are purchasing it. When you're putting your ad up, of course, there's only so much you can put in the ad. If you go and put a whole list of defects, you may as well not even put any ad up there. Who's going to come buy your product anyway, right? But, of course, in terms of the manual or whatever concerning it, then you do mention some things which become the defects where there are some elements of possible harm that can come from them. In terms of the question from the sisters, they were asking concerning verse 18, where Allah mentions that if you had seen them, where the way they were lying, if you had seen them, that you would have fled in fright. What does this actually mean? Well, scholars of Tafseer, have speculated as to really what this is actually referring to. Was it that Allah put on them a horrible appearance? So it was just like a scary thing. You came in, they looked like monsters or something like this, right? Some people had proposed something of that nature. But we don't have any evidence to confirm what it's referring to. Just enough to say that if you looked into a cave and saw people rolling from side to side, you know, without seeming to be asleep yet rolling from side to side like this, it's something very unusual, something strange, you know, that would discourage you from wanting to going in or going any further. And also the dog in the entrance of the cave, you know, all of that would serve to discourage people or put them to flight, you know, from. So that's, you know, that's as much as we could really say.
Does that mean that people saw them during that 300 years?
Well, it could mean that, well, Allah said that had they been seen, it implies that they could have been seen, you know, because the cave, it's likely, though it may be not close by or whatever, that people may pass by. And the dog in the entrance also, why have the dog in the entrance? No need to have the dog in the entrance if wouldn't be a means of discouraging people from entering. So it is quite possible that people had seen them over the years, but nobody would dare to venture in because of whatever they saw. You know, it was enough to scare them and cause them to flee in the opposite direction.
I have two questions on the issue of Abu Huraira you mentioned. If it lived up to Hajjaj bin Yusuf, when did he come in? He was there at the time of Rasulullah. How long did he live?
No, Hajjaj ibn Yusuf is, you know, right within 25 years after the time of the Prophet ﷺ, you know. No, this is within.
The other thing is that according to what Abu Huraira said about the knowledge that he had and the knowledge of Hajjaj bin Yusuf, is it authentic, the hadith, that the biggest jihad is speaking out against an oppressive ruler?
Yeah, the hadith of brother's question, speaking that the greatest jihad is speaking out against oppressive ruler. This is authentic.
Okay, but
Yeah.
in the case of Abu Huraira, I mean, that would have been greater for him to have said what he had in that bag of knowledge.
Okay, well, brother is saying that it would have been greater for him to have said, Abu Huraira to have said what he had in that remaining knowledge. Well, this is your judgment. You see, your judgment from your perspective. You weren't living at that time, seeing Sahaba being massacred left and right around you, knowing that you have, you know, the greatest hadiths, the most of the sunnah, you know, because if you consider what he narrated, you know, being the most prolific narrator of the sunnah, and compare it to what others narrated, you know, they're very insignificant. You know, so the greatest proportion of the sunnah was preserved by him. So he made a value judgment here. And we, inshallah, praise him for his judgment.
My question relates to clean eating, which you mentioned, eating clean without riba. Certain areas are very obvious, like somebody working in the bank is suddenly straight away coming out of the riba. It's very clear. But we look at it at a macro level on the whole of the economy. We see whole of the day's economy is based on interest, whether directly or indirectly.
Okay.
So how do we classify that? And do you think there are certain gray areas? And how should we attend to that situation?
Okay. The brother's question.
The same question. If the interest is not there, how can the government, this bank can run, or the whole things can run?
Okay, that's another issue. That's a different issue. The first point raised by the brother, you know, concerning the fact that interest is so embedded in the economy today in most countries that virtually any amount of money you earn, any salary you earn in any job anywhere, an element of interest is going to be there. And the Prophet ﷺ spoke of that time, that the interest would be so widespread that if it, you know, it didn't touch you directly, you would be affected by its dust. You know? So the point is that what you cannot control, you are not held responsible for. But what you can control, that's what you're held responsible for. So that person who is directly involved, you know, he's directly involved, his business is a haram business. He is an importer of cigarettes. You know, whatever. I mean, his business is clearly haram, involved in haram. Not an element, because again, somebody, you know, in any business, you may have a minute element, a corner, something where it's touched, it's being affected. But the general earning is from halal. somebody like that, you're okay, you know. But where it is clear, the man works in a bank, you know, he is involved in whatever operation which is no doubt, you have no doubt that this involves haram, then such a person is the one that you have to avoid eating at. But there is an exception made. If you went to his home for the purpose of giving him dawah, the scholars have made that exception. If you're going there and when you sit with him, you advise him, you try to encourage him. Because if you just stand a distance away just throwing bombs at him, you know, of course he's not going to respond positively to it. But where you build some kind of relationship, you do come, you visit him, you sit with him, he's your relative. You know, you advise him and so on, so on, so on. And after you have given the advice, then you know there's nothing else you can give. He's not listening anymore, he's closed the door, whatever. Then you know that your being there now is just being there. Then that's the time to abandon that individual, not necessarily cut off communications with him, but at least eating his food, you know, it's time now to step back.
What about Islamic bank?
Question from the sister is that if a person is not interested in the knowledge that you have to give them, right? They're in a situation which is not correct, and you're trying to inform them, but they're not interested. How do you correct them? You don't. If you can't, if they're not willing to hear, then that's what you can't. All you can do is just do it yourself. You know, do what you're supposed to do yourself, and perhaps they may see that and learn from your example. But I mean, you cannot force people to believe in what you have. You try to give it to them. If they don't want to hear it, then you have to leave it. You know, for you to try to push it, we say, well, no, you need to know this, so I'm going to, you know, beat you over the head with it. You know, then it is you're fighting a losing cause. We say you're beating a dead horse. You know, it's not gonna bring about any change. It is only going to develop resentment. People are going to resent your efforts. Yeah, the brother's question concerning economies functioning without interest. You know, that's a whole big topic on Islamic banking, etc., Islamic economics. It's enough for us to say that all of the economists agree that the lower the rate of interest, the better, more vibrant is the economy. So if you bring it down to zero, which is what Islam says, then for sure we have a much better society. Question? Go ahead, brother.
My question is, we were talking about the critical knowledge, but also there is some knowledge like in the medicine or like which is helpful to the community in general, and that has to be studied along. Means it is not a matter of a year or 2 years, you know, and it should be continuously studied. So that comes under critical knowledge, or you know, a person should stop at a point and say, this is enough, and I should gain the critical knowledge of Islam.
Okay, brother's question concerning other areas of knowledge which we may not classify as Islamic per se, but there are critical areas of knowledge like medicine, dentistry, engineering, these type of things, which are necessary for society to function. It's enough to know that knowledge can be divided into two categories. Individual obligatory knowledge, what they call fard ayn, and that is knowledge of your deen to the degree necessary to be able to live a 24-hour day doing what is pleasing to Allah. And knowledge about any of the rights and things you have to do that it's time to do. Like Hajj. You know, Hajj is past. You're not required to know about Hajj unless you're planning to make Hajj. I mean, know about it in general, that it's a requirement, but the details of how to do Hajj, when the time comes for you to do Hajj, when it's obligatory only, that's the time when you need to know it. Huh? The other knowledge, which we call community obligatory knowledge, which as long as some members of the community do it, then its obligation is removed from the others. That is like medicine, dentistry, and these other areas. So if you choose to enter into that area of knowledge, then, of course, you should try to gain as much of that knowledge as is necessary to fulfill the need of the community. If your community, for example, is a very basic community, they only need basic medicine. For you to become a research scientist, where you end up sitting in a laboratory, where in the US, producing products for their society. But your community, Muslim community back home, just needs you to be able to give them some medicine, fix their broken bones, etc. Then you see, you've gone to extremes there. You should have stopped where it was sufficient to fulfill what you originally came for. Because of course, once you get over in these areas, then the big dollar signs, for big time research start to attract you. You start to lose your perspective. Your focus is gone. So we say you go in and take what is necessary to fulfill the need that you sought to fulfill. Okay. Okay, question from the sisters. If a person is involved, for example, in a profession like law, which involves corruption in a lot of cases, can we eat of that person's earnings? Can we eat of that person's earnings? Well, the point is that law, there are elements of law which can be halal. You're defending the poor, you're defending the oppressed, you're defending people whose rights have been taken, etc. And then you're not involved in haram in that respect. So simply because a poor person is a lawyer doesn't necessarily mean you automatically have to be corrupt. Lawyers don't have to be corrupt. It is a corrupting field that one has to be careful of, but simply being a lawyer doesn't mean you're corrupt. You have lawyers here who are involved in Sharia, local law as well as the Sharia law, etc., and we can't say they're fine. So, those type of jobs which may involve corruption, but they're not necessarily, then we don't make judgments on those people. We can eat from them. The other example of halal jobs, a person has a halal job. Oh, that's the iqama. I'll just quickly say it, but they have a mortgage. Well, the mortgage is the mortgage. The food is the food. We don't try to mix everything up. Person's deposits in the bank. If you have deposits in the bank, can you give the interest? Again, you shouldn't have the deposits in the bank getting the interest. But if you did end up with it and found out it was haram, then it's given to not the poor, but to some organization to be used for general benefit and not for individual benefit. Building bathrooms for a Muslim school or something like this, or a road, but not given to direct individuals as charity, because Allah is pure and good and He only accepts what is pure and good. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.